it means there's no end in sight. But with Ukraine and Gaza grabbing Western attention, Sudan is at risk of becoming a forgotten conflict.
That was Electra Naismith reporting. To Haiti next, where the main political parties are urging the outgoing Prime Minister Ariel Henry to speed up his exit. The Caribbean nation has descended into chaos, with gangs taking control and basic services collapsing. Mr. Henry has been locked out of the country since March, when gangs shut down Haiti's international airport as he travelled back from Kenya. Mr. Henry had pledged to install a new transitional council in a bid to restore stability. Now the 9 parties and groups represented in the council have issued a statement criticising him. Our America's regional editor, Leonardo Rocha, who's in Miami, told us what else was in the statement.
They said they were shocked with the decree that was published on the official Gazette on Friday. They expected the names of these representatives in the Transitional Council, there are 7 members with voting powers and 2 observers, to be there making it official. They also expected the terms of this agreement that was signed about a month ago when Mr. Henry basically was forced to resign. They expected all that to be in that decree, and that wasn't there. So they think they're delaying tactics from Mr. Henry, who was reluctant to go in the first place.
But why might Mr. Henry be slow to step down now?
Well, what he says is that he will publish the second decree with more details. He wanted to make that official by Friday. What we hear from the media and from people in Haiti is that he's being reluctant because you have a new council now which will basically replace him with the power, and he might be ousted, he might be out of the process, not only him but the political forces that he represents, and probably he doesn't want to be left out. But we're expecting the Transitional Council to be inaugurated, to be installed this week.
And will this National Transitional Council be enough to restore stability? We've seen so many images of total lawlessness.
It's a surreal situation. The description you get from everyone there is that it is really awful. Rape being used against people, gangs shooting in the street, the ports in the airport have been blocked for a month, shortages of food and medication. So what you expect the Transitional Council is basically to challenge the gangs, to send them a message initially, and they want this inauguration to be in the National Palace that's been attacked by gangs almost daily. That will be an important first step, and then there will be the deployment of this UN force led by Kenya. That would be the beginning of everything. But what many people have been saying for a long time is that you need a political solution to move things forward, and the Transitional Council might be the way forward. It's the only option for Haiti now.
That was Leonardo Rocha. Croatians will be heading to the polls on Wednesday for parliamentary elections, and it's become a battle of personalities. Prime Minister Andrej Plenković is looking for a third term for his HDZ party, but President Zoran Milanović has declared himself as a possible head of government if the centre-left coalition wins. Our correspondent Guy Delaunay sent this report.
Rivers of justice. That's the rallying cry of Croatia's centre-left opposition parties ahead of polling day. They accuse the governing HDZ party of corruption and cronyism. They say that's been driving tens of thousands of young Croatians to leave the country every year. Sandra Benčić is the main candidate of the Green Left party, Možemo.
People who are HDZ actually get the jobs or promotions or better salaries. This hopelessness that it will not change pushes people across the border, and most of them do not get back.
But the centre-left opposition is feeling more hopeful than usual ahead of this particular election. The HDZ usually dominates, pulling support from both centre-right and right-wing nationalists, but this time might be different, all because of one man. When he announced the election date, President Zoran Milanović declared that he would be the centre-left's candidate for Prime Minister. That electrified the race due to his popularity. But the Constitutional Court swiftly ruled that the president was ineligible. In return, Mr. Milanović accused the judges of doing the government's bidding.
That
gangster clique has taken the court hostage. Such peasants are illiterate, so it's a problem, because that means the decision is also illiterate.
Despite the court ban on his candidacy, the president's been travelling around the country meeting supporters. Officially, he's not been campaigning, but there seems little doubt that he'd resign to take up the Prime Minister's post if the centre-left won. The sound system is blasting out at this playground here in the centre of Zagreb. The event we've got on here is basically promoting sport for young people, but it's also being co-opted by the governing party of Croatia, the HDZ, with Prime Minister Andrej Plenković due to make an appearance.
What is relevant that the Croats are provided with the government and with the parliamentary majority, which will ensure stability over the next 4 years and create conditions for economic growth and social cohesion.
Is it damaging for Croatia to have this sort of competition between the President and the Prime Minister?
Well, it's bizarre, but I'm trying to sort of minimize the negative effects of this unconstitutional acts. For us, it's a continuation of an odd behavior, to be very polite.
The Prime Minister might not like it, but the candidate who isn't a candidate remains the one to watch. And while he remains president, Zoran Milanovic will also have a major role to play in the formation of Croatia's next government. Whichever way you look at it, in this election, he's very much taking centre stage.
Guy Delaunay. Calls to legalise abortion in Germany are expected to be supported by a government-appointed commission later today. Abortion is illegal in Germany, but decriminalised up to 12 weeks of pregnancy. Jessica Parker reports from Berlin.
Experts in medicine, ethics and law were tasked with examining this issue last year. Currently in Germany, abortion is largely illegal but not punishable if carried out in the first 12 weeks and after mandatory counselling. The Commission is today expected to recommend that abortions be properly legalised in the earlier stages of pregnancy. Supporters of such a change say the current rules contribute to stigmatisation as well as a system of patchy access and information. But this, as in many countries, is a controversial topic. Conservatives have warned of social conflict and pledged to challenge any liberalisation in the courts.
Salman Rushdie has lived with the threat of violence since his controversial novel The Satanic Verses was published in 1988. 2 years ago, a man attacked him on stage in New York.
Author Salman Rushdie was attacked.
Author Salman Rushdie attacked.
Rushdie has been stabbed.
There was confusion and panic. The attack happened in full view of the audience, with Sir Salman left injured, lying on stage, and eyewitnesses in deep shock.
Salman Rushdie was stabbed 12 times, losing his sight in one eye. The suspect was arrested immediately and pleaded not guilty to attempted murder. His trial was postponed because of Rushdie's upcoming memoir about the attack. The award-winning author spoke to my colleague Alan Yentov ahead of the book's publication.
I did wonder if somebody was going to jump out of an audience one day. He was dressed in dark clothing and he had a black COVID mask. And he just came sprinting up the stairs to the stage. And when I saw him running, I stood up. I don't know why I didn't fight. And I don't know why I didn't try to escape. But he was 24. I was 75.
What were your first thoughts?
Well, I mean, I wasn't really thinking, you know. I was being beaten up quite severely. I thought he just punched me very hard. I didn't realize there was a knife in his hand. The first wound was here on the corner of the jaw, as I thought. And then I think he was just slashing wildly at everything. Across my neck, my forehead, down the middle of my torso, 1, 2, 3, like that. 2 on the side over here, and 1 on my thigh over here. At some point I put up my hand to protect myself, and he stuck a knife in it. And then there was the wound in my eye, which was quite deep, which is why there's no possibility of saving the sight. It's really upsetting. Language is a way of cutting things open and revealing the truth. And so calling this book Knife is not just a description of the attack against me. The book is the knife. There will be a moment when I will be in court with my attacker. I don't know what he would say if he was asked, why did you do it? If I was to write a story in which somebody decided to murder a total stranger on the basis of having read maybe 2 pages of what he'd written and seen a couple of YouTube videos. Publishers would say that's not convincing. So it is the most puzzling thing, not only how little he knew about me, but that he didn't seem to feel the need to inform himself.
Does this attack suggest that freedom of speech has got more and more difficult rather than less so since...
Freedom of speech has got much more difficult, and not just for this kind of reason. It's more difficult because a lot of people, including a lot of young people, I'm sorry to say, have formed the opinion that restrictions on freedom of speech are often a good idea. It's now almost okay to be prepared to suppress speech that you don't agree with. Whereas, of course, the whole point of freedom of speech is that you have to permit speech you don't agree with.
You've been through all of this. What about the future?
I think I'm a pretty obstinate person, and I'm going to have my life. When I was lying there on the ground bleeding profusely, I found myself idiotically thinking, oh, that's my nice suit's about to be ruined. And my house keys are in that pocket, which at the time, of course, is ludicrous, but there's an immensely strong survival instinct that human beings have that kicks in, that was saying to me, you're going to live, live, live. And I think that's why I wanted my house keys.
Salman Rushdie. Now let's return to our main news and some thoughts on Saturday night's Iranian airstrikes and what Israel might do next. Lise Doucette was the BBC's correspondent in Jerusalem and has also reported from and about Iran for decades. So what, if anything, has changed?
A lot has changed, and in some ways it is that paradox that everything has changed and nothing has changed. A red line was crossed. Iran has attacked for the first time Israel directly from Iranian territory, putting an end to what have been decades of shadow wars and covert operations by Israel. It is now out in the open, and in some ways Iran crossed its own red line. It was often said that Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, had come to power in 1989 after the devastating 8-year-long Iran-Iraq war, which took as many as 200,000 Iranian lives, and that he had always tried to avoid an all-out war. But it got to the point that Iran could no longer turn away from the pressure building at home among the Revolutionary Guards, that Israel had to not just retaliate, but be seen to retaliate. It had to consolidate its perceived prestige as the head of this so-called axis of resistance. But it had to do it in a way which didn't provoke an escalatory spiral. So Iran is declaring success, saying it achieved its objectives and has no intention to continue operations. Israel, as it says, it's achieved its objectives in repelling this attack, bringing down 99% of the drones and missiles, and not just that, doing it with the very, very public support of some of its key allies. The big question now is, this is not just about a tit for tat. Iran, of course, sees this as a retaliatory strike. It's about deterrence. Both countries will want to believe that they have sent a clear message: don't mess with us, don't attack, because if deterrence isn't established, then this region is on a far more dangerous spiral, with the very real threat of more attacks to come.
That was Lise Doucette, our chief international correspondent. Stay with us if you can. We'll have a summary of the latest world news for you in just a moment. I'm Jackie Leonard, and you've been listening to The Newsroom.
This is the BBC World Service, where Dr. Zoe Williams is examining the gender gap in medicine.
I've been aware for some time that the medical profession has treated men and women as if they're the same. From the way medical students are taught, to the way doctors diagnose women and men, and the way they then treat them. But men and women's bodies are not the same.
In the brain, in the heart, in the muscles. The differences are actually in every single cell in the body.
In this programme, I'm going to look at how women have been suffering and sometimes dying because there's been no understanding or acknowledgement of the fact that we are not just little men.
Women are more likely to be misdiagnosed, underdiagnosed, and when you can't diagnose, the physician doesn't know what to do, so they don't get treated.
His and Hers Medicine, Saturday at 11 GMT, or listen now wherever you get your BBC podcasts.
On The Conversation, two women saving lives at sea. You'll hear from a teacher in Wales who volunteers for the lifeboat charity, the RNLI, and was one of the first women crew members when she joined over 30 years ago. And a lifeguard trying to keep tourists safe on the beaches of Goa, one of the few women doing the job. They'll discuss putting their own lives in danger to rescue others. That's all after the news.
BBC News with Neil Lopez. The United Nations has called for greater humanitarian assistance to help the huge numbers of people who flee Sudan each day. The country is marking 1 year since the start of a war between its army and the paramilitary rapid support forces. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has said it's time to step back from the brink after Iran launched hundreds of missiles and drones at Israel late on Saturday. Mr. Guterres told the UN Security Council that people in the Middle East were confronting a real danger of a devastating full-scale conflict. Haiti's main political parties have urged the outgoing Prime Minister Ariel Henry to speed up the installation of a new transitional council that's due to take power and organize the next presidential elections. The government-appointed commission in Germany is set to recommend the legalization of abortion. Currently, abortion is largely illegal in Germany, but not punishable if carried out in the first 12 weeks and after mandatory counselling. The police chief of New South Wales in Australia, investigating the Sydney shopping centre attacker, has said one line of inquiries that he was targeting women. Joel Cauchi killed 5 women and 1 man with a knife before he was shot dead. An opposition politician in the Solomon Islands has called China's influence over the Pacific Island nation alarming. Daniel Swidani told the French news agency that he was troubled by what he called Beijing's corrosive impact on democracy in the country. The award-winning novelist Salman Rushdie, who was seriously injured in a stabbing attack 2 years ago, has warned that freedom of speech has become much more difficult in recent years. He told the BBC that unfortunately today many people consider that restrictions on speech are often a good idea. BBC News.
I'm Ella Ashmahi, and this is The Conversation, the programme that amplifies women's voices, which is just a fancy way of saying we get 2 incredible women who share an expertise, bring them together, and see what happens. And today I'm talking to 2 women who are saving lives at sea. Vivienne Gray was one of the first women to join the Royal National Lifeboat Institution when she started as a volunteer in 1990, while a crew member at Little and Broadhaven RNLI in Wales, she was involved in more than 120 lifeboat shouts, which I guess are non-life-saving folk who call emergency call-outs, and is credited directly for saving the lives of 8 people. Ananya Bath is a lifeguard and lifeguard trainer in India. She is 28 and works for Drishti Marine, a safety and life-saving service which has 400 lifesavers patrolling Goa's 103-kilometre coastline. Vivienne, Ananya, welcome. Can I ask, Ananya, when did you first become aware of lifeguards?
So I had been coming to Goa since I was a small child. We used to come every year when it was too cold back from where I am. I live in Himachal Pradesh. It's in North India. It's a very cold state, not as cold as where you are, of course. Cold. And so we used to come to Goa every winter. So I knew about lifeguards. I had seen them on the beaches. I saw them patrolling, and I was someone who was very fond of the water, so it was really hard to keep me out. So there was always a lifeguard, trying to get me out of the water, especially when it was going down. And at that time, of course, I didn't understand why he was trying to, always pull me out of the water instead of letting me be. So I knew about lifeguards. I knew they existed. I knew that I was from Goa.
To hear about the RNLI.
I was born in America and grew up there, and the inshore lifeboat was a big part of the community. So even as a child, the lifeboat formed a big part of our lives within the village. And in those days we didn't have pagers, they had what they call maroons. And the maroons were like a wash and a bag, and that was to tell the crew the lifeboat needed to be launched. And I can remember as a child, we would run to help launch the lifeboat, because there was no tractor, there was no Land Rover, the lifeboat was pushed down to the village. So as children we would help. And as I grew up, you know, I knew I was used to going out on boats, going fishing, I've always loved the sea, like an Anya, and always felt I had an affinity with the sea. So when I came home from university, the crew was quite short